Contact tracing, it's a word that we understand, you and I do, but a lot of people don't know what that word means, and you don't hear very much about it in the news. But kind of talk about what we're seeing now and what you're seeing in the future from as far as contact tracing and what it means.
Yeah. Contact tracing seems like a scary term for a lot of people, just because they feel, it could be, they want somebody looking over their shoulder, or they don't want that. Really, the truest form of contact tracing is notification and information, to be quite honest. And so when an individual is found to have coronavirus and they do a contact tracing program, really what they're trying to do is figure out who were the highest possibilities of transmission of the virus, and then getting a hold of those individuals and saying, you have been exposed to the coronavirus. You really need to be keeping a pretty strong eye on your symptoms, self-monitoring, and what your activities are out and about. It's a lot of people see it as extremely restrictive. It's really protective in nature, and it's really a pretty good tool in the end to try to mitigate the spread. So it's just more knowledge than anything. And I think if I had the choice of having more knowledge, if I was exposed, I would want to know, so then I could make better informed decisions about what my next steps would be. So really, that's how I would look at it, is to say it's a way for you to have more understanding of what your exposures have been, and for you to help reduce the spread and play your part in that.
So we hear the word a lot, exposed, right? You and I hear that on a regular basis. Kind of define that, because there's two different exposures, right? We have those that are within 6 feet, which you and I have not been, and there's a time period that I'm going to ask you to define. And then there's the intentional, where someone was actually exposed to somebody with the virus. And then there's someone that's exposed with just signs and symptoms of the virus.
Yeah, you really have a variety of situations, and depending on if you're wearing masks, how close you were. If you're in a situation where nobody was wearing masks and you were interacting with that individual at a close distance for a prolonged period of time, really greater than 15 minutes or so, your chance of getting the virus from that individual are fairly high. Really, it's if we're each wearing our masks and we're in a situation where maybe you have the virus, you're wearing a mask, and I'm interacting with you, your social distance portion of it, and then I'm wearing my mask, the potential for transmission goes down significantly. So really, if you think about a true exposure, people will say, are you a high risk exposure, or maybe a medium risk or a low risk exposure? They're taking into account all those different things. Were masks being worn? How close were you to that individual? And how long were you interacting with that individual? If you put all those things together, then you can kind of formulate that picture of how exposed you were. And whether or not you may need to get tested or quarantined for a certain period of time. A lot of things people will talk about is quarantining and isolation. And quarantine is something where you don't have symptoms and you're worried because you had an exposure. So then you'll quarantine at home for a period of usually 14 days because that allows for time for the virus to develop in your body, and then for that disease course to take place, and then to have symptoms resolved in that period of time. If you're symptomatic, you still could be asymptomatic and have it as well. So really, those are the kinds of things you should be considering if you're thinking about being exposed to the virus, is all those different factors.
So we had a question come in from one of our business owners, James, and James has a question. He says, one of my employees Jared was at a bonfire over the weekend, and someone let him know that they have a really bad fever and a cough. What should the business owner, what decisions should James be making at this point?
Yeah, it's one of those where in that situation you have potentially, party or other environment where there could have been a lot of spread of the virus. So a business owner can make several different decisions in that situation. They could decide if there was a large enough group of their employees that were exposed to close the business down for a certain period of time and wait for some symptoms to occur, have their employees work remotely, still be productive in that period of time. But that would truly mitigate any risk of exposure or transmission within the office environment. You could take the stance of having people come back to work, but being very strong on those precautions, is to say everybody needs to be self-monitoring, taking their temperatures, ensuring they're not having any symptoms, wearing their masks, and operating with proper distancing measures within the office. It could involve testing. So you could have a situation where you said, hey, you were in a situation, a party, and here was a potential exposure to the virus. So, even starting as early as 4 or 5 days after that event, start having people be tested for coronavirus, and that would pick up the live virus in their system, maybe before they even are having symptoms. So, a couple different strategies they could take. I think it depends on what level of risk the individual business wants to assume, and what amount of work can be done remotely.
Another business owner question we have is from Adam. He has a question. He has an employee who is Jenna. She calls in and says, "Hey, my husband has coronavirus. What do I do?" So what's your next step there? What's your next question you're going to have for that business owner, Adam?
Yeah, especially in the home environment, that would be considered one of the greatest risks for transmission, because you're interacting so closely with those individuals, and you're more than likely not wearing a mask in that situation. And there's just a lot of contact and potentials for transmission. So one of the things I would first advise Jenna to do would be not to come into the workplace, even if she's feeling fine, because she's at a very high risk exposure. And then I would encourage her to potentially receive a test in that situation. The chances of Jenna actually coming down with the virus are fairly high. So we would want to know, by still abiding by privacy standards, how her husband is doing, how that family situation is going. But I would highly advise a testing strategy for her to come back to work and provide her with the opportunity to work remotely in that situation. But her chances of having the virus are significantly higher in that situation.
And your company, Health Bar, can help facilitate that test.
Yes, yeah. One of the great things about Health Bar and what we're able to provide is that home environment testing. So we can go to that individual's house without having them come out to an area where they potentially would be spreading the virus themselves. So we're trying to reduce the exposure as much as possible. So meeting that individual at their home, testing them there, and then bringing the test back to the laboratory for processing really reduces significantly the opportunity for the virus to spread. So one of the services we provide, and it's very convenient and easy and fast for the individual.
Oh, that's awesome. Nathan, your energy and passion and knowledge it is up here. So I really appreciate you taking time to spend the afternoon with OVD. And we have to make sure we're social distancing and putting our masks on. So thank you very much. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, appreciate it. And no, you guys have been great too. And looking forward to future conversations.
Absolutely.